Stepmom demanded I pay 900 rent in my own house. That was the moment I realized enough was enough. For years, I'd been treated like the unpaid maid while my stepbrother Tyler wasted his days chasing Twitch fame and my stepsister Madison blew through credit cards on lattes and selfies. My stepmom, Valerie, sat on the couch judging every chore I did, while my dad, Robert, turned a blind eye. And then, she had the audacity to sit across from me at the kitchen island, smile that fake smile, and tell me I owed her rent money. What Valerie didn't know was that the 1.4 million house she'd been nesting in all this time wasn't hers, or even my dad's. My grandparents had secretly signed it over to me years ago. So when Valerie pushed, I pushed back harder. This time, I wasn't just standing my ground, I was evicting hers. When people hear what I eventually did, they think I must have always been strong. The truth? I grew up being the quiet one who swallowed her pain. My story didn't start with eviction notices or legal documents, it started with loss. I was only 8 when my mom, Laura, passed away from breast cancer. One day she was humming in the kitchen while making her famous peach pie, and the next she was gone. My dad, Robert, was shattered. He went through the motions of life like a man underwater, barely breathing. That's when my grandparents, George and Margaret, stepped in. They practically moved into our house, raising me when my dad couldn't. They were my anchor kind, steady, and fiercely protective. They also made a quiet decision that would change everything years later. They had savings, a comfortable retirement, and the foresight to buy a 4-bedroom house in a good Boston neighborhood. It wasn't a mansion, but it was ours. They registered it in a way I never knew back then, a safeguard, written in legal ink, that tied the deed to me. I was just a little girl coloring at the dining table when they signed papers that would someday save me. For a while, it worked. We lived like a patchwork family stitched together by grief but held strong by love. My grandma made me pancakes every Saturday. My grandpa drove me to piano lessons and never complained, even when traffic was awful. I thought maybe life would settle into something steady. Then came Valerie. Dad met her at a business conference in Chicago, 2 years after Mom's passing. He was lonely, vulnerable, and desperate for a fresh start. Valerie was charming in that polished, too perfect way, lipstick always flawless, heels clicking like she was walking on a stage. Within months, she packed up her life and moved across the country. She didn't come alone. Valerie brought her 2 kids. Tyler, then 11, and Madison, just 7. At first I thought maybe it wouldn't be so bad. Maybe having new siblings could fill the empty spaces in the house. But the moment she stepped through the door, carrying herself like she owned the place, my grandparents exchanged worried glances. I remember overhearing them whisper late at night in the kitchen. Grandma's voice was firm, almost trembling with worry. "She's after Robert's money," Grandpa sighed, agreeing but choosing silence for the sake of Dad's fragile happiness. They were right, of course, but back then, I didn't understand. Valerie started small, complaining that the wallpaper looked outdated, that the kitchen desperately needed upgrades. Soon, she wasn't just making suggestions, she was rearranging furniture, tossing out Mom's old decorations, and planting herself in every decision. Dad called it making the house feel fresh. I called it erasing the last pieces of my mother. And little by little, the home that once felt safe became a place where I walked on eggshells. The cracks widened quickly after Valerie moved in. What began as subtle complaints about furniture or decor turned into full-scale control. By the time I hit 12, the house didn't feel like mine anymore, it felt like hers. She had this way of making everything sound like a favor. "Chloe, could you help out with the dishes tonight? Your brother Tyler is busy practicing basketball." At first, I thought it was temporary, that maybe things would even out. But helping out became my full-time job. Valerie inspected my chores like a drill sergeant. She'd run her finger along the baseboards to check for dust, sigh dramatically if I missed a spot, and make snide remarks like, "A young woman should know how to keep a proper home." Meanwhile, Tyler's room smelled like pizza boxes and gym socks, and Madison's floor was a permanent sea of clothes and makeup bags. Yet no one said a word to them. I did the laundry, even Tyler's sweat-drenched jerseys. I vacuumed, cooked dinner, scrubbed bathrooms until my hands cracked. Valerie called it teaching responsibility. But let's be real, she was teaching me how to be her maid. The double standards were infuriating. Tyler had a private basketball coach Dad paid for, even though he barely made it off the bench at school games. When he quit basketball, he announced he'd be a content creator. Valerie praised his entrepreneurial spirit, ignoring the fact that he had 200 TikTok followers and no job. Madison? She was pampered like a princess. She'd get new clothes every month, expensive makeup kits, even a car once she turned 16. When she crashed it twice, Dad just bought another one. Me? I worked part-time at Starbucks just to have pocket money. Every shift I pulled, I came home smelling like espresso and caramel drizzle, only to be greeted by Valerie's smug face telling me dinner still needed to be made. She never lifted a finger. What made it worse was how Dad seemed blind to everything. He'd come home exhausted from work, and Valerie would pour him a drink, acting like the perfect wife. By the time I tried to speak up, she had already planted seeds in his head. Chloe's moody. Chloe needs more discipline. Chloe doesn't appreciate what we provide. Slowly, he stopped listening to me altogether. I remember one night vividly. I was hunched over the sink, scrubbing pans after cooking spaghetti for the whole family. Tyler was upstairs yelling into his headset. Madison was scrolling Instagram on the couch, and Valerie was sipping wine, watching reality TV. My dad walked in, kissed Valerie on the cheek, and said, "Looks like Chloe's finally learning responsibility." I wanted to scream. Responsibility? No slavery. The house I had once loved, the house filled with my mom's laughter and my grandparents' warmth, was turning into a prison cell. Every corner reminded me of what I'd lost and what I was forced to endure. And the worst part? I didn't even know that house was legally mine. If I had, things might have been different sooner. I always wondered why my grandparents were so protective of me. They weren't just grandparents, they were guardians, my shield against a world that suddenly felt hostile after Mom's death. What I didn't know was that they had set something in motion years earlier, a safety net I wouldn't discover until much later. When Grandma Margaret passed away from heart complications in 2019, I was devastated. She was the one who made pancakes on Saturdays, who braided my hair before school dances, who whispered, "Don't let anyone dim your light, Chloe." Just 3 months later, Grandpa George followed her, unable to live without her. Losing them both felt like losing my last true home. But tucked away in their will was a revelation. The 4-bedroom house in Boston, the one Valerie had slowly taken over, wasn't just some shared family property. It was legally mine. My grandparents had transferred the deed years earlier, naming me the sole owner. They must have seen the storm coming, seen Valerie for who she was, and decided to protect me the only way they knew how. I didn't find out right away. My dad, Robert, knew, but he never mentioned it. Typical dad burying anything uncomfortable. Maybe he thought it didn't matter while I was still young, or maybe he didn't want to stir conflict with Valerie. But keeping that secret nearly broke me. For years, I scrubbed floors, cooked meals, and folded laundry in a house that was rightfully mine, believing I was just a guest who had to earn my keep. Valerie strutted around like a queen, redecorating at will, tossing out my mother's keepsakes, dictating every rule. And I played along, because I thought I had no power. Looking back, it's almost laughable. Valerie would brag to her friends about her home during book club nights. Tyler filmed his terrible TikTok dances in his living room. Madison posted filtered selfies in her kitchen, cluttered with Starbucks cups. And me? I was the invisible servant, cleaning up their messes. Had I known the truth then, every single chore I did would have felt different. I wouldn't have swallowed her insults or let her treat me like I owed her something. I would have smiled every time she nagged me about the dishwasher, knowing she was the one freeloading off me. But ignorance kept me quiet. The secret of the deed remained hidden, locked in paperwork Valerie never saw. It wouldn't come to light until she made her boldest, most arrogant move yet, demanding that I, the true owner of the house, pay rent to live under my own roof. It was a Thursday, the kind of day where exhaustion sank into my bones before I even walked through the front door. I had just finished an 8-hour shift at Starbucks, dealing with impatient customers who thought almond milk was a human right. My hair smelled like coffee beans, my clothes clung to the scent of vanilla syrup, and all I wanted was a hot shower and silence. Instead, I walked into the kitchen and found Valerie waiting. She was perched at the island, perfectly polished as always, hair curled, nails gleaming, lips painted in that shade of fake confidence. She looked like she was about to host a business meeting, not talk to her stepdaughter who had just clocked out from slinging lattes. "Chloe, we need to have a serious discussion," she began, her tone dripping with faux authority. I froze, wooden spoon still in my hand as I stirred spaghetti sauce. "About what?" "Your living situation." Those words made me blink. My living situation? I'd been here longer than she had. But she pressed on, her eyes narrowing like she was savoring the power of what she was about to say. "Your father and I have decided it's time you start paying rent. You're 22 now, you're working, and it isn't fair for you to live here for free while we cover the bills." For a second, I thought she was joking. Then I realized Valerie doesn't joke, she schemes. "How much rent?" I asked, my voice flat. $900 a month, she replied smoothly, as if she were doing me a favor. "Plus utilities, of course, and you'll still be expected to help around the house." I nearly dropped the spoon. $900? For a house I'd been cleaning, cooking in, and maintaining for years? "Are Tyler and Madison paying rent too?" I asked. She dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin she hadn't even used. "That's different. They're my children. Tyler is still pursuing his career, and Madison is focused on her education." I wanted to laugh, but fury burned hotter than humor. Tyler's career was dancing badly on TikTok to an audience of 3 people, one of whom was definitely Valerie. Madison's education involved skipping classes and posting Instagram photos of her Starbucks cups. And yet, in Valerie's world, they were deserving of free room and board while I was the one who needed to pay up. The room felt heavy with all the years I'd swallowed her comments, all the insults she slipped into daily life, all the chores she forced on me while she lounged on the couch. Something inside me snapped. I set down the spoon, turned off the burner, and faced her. My voice was calm, almost too calm. "Let me get this straight," I said. "Your kids can freeload indefinitely, but you expect me to pay rent in this house?" Her smile twitched, Botox freezing the rest of her face. "Exactly. I'm glad you understand." But she had no idea. I understood more than she ever could. And soon, she'd realize just how wrong she was to push me. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch between us, long enough for the spaghetti sauce to bubble and pop behind me. Valerie thought she'd cornered me, but in truth, she'd just walked into a trap she didn't even know existed. Finally, I set the spoon down, wiped my hands on a towel, and said, "If this is a family matter, then the whole family should be here, don't you think?" Her eyebrows arched, suspicious, but she nodded. "Fine, let's bring them in." I raised my voice. "Tyler, Madison, Dad, family meeting." A few minutes later, Tyler stomped downstairs, annoyed I had interrupted his gaming. Madison floated in from the living room, phone in hand, clearly mid-selfie session. Dad walked in last, rubbing the back of his neck, already looking tired from another long day. They sat around the dining table, unaware they were about to witness an earthquake. Valerie stood like a CEO giving a presentation. "We've all agreed Chloe will start paying rent $900 a month, plus utilities. It's only fair." Tyler smirked, already calculating what he could buy with the extra cash flowing into the household. Madison rolled her eyes at me like I was dramatic for even questioning it. Dad just looked down at his hands, avoiding my gaze. That was when I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and said calmly, "No, I'm not paying rent." Valerie's head snapped toward me, eyes flashing. "Excuse me?" I held her gaze. "I'm not paying rent. Because this house isn't yours. It's mine." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop or, in this case, Tyler's fork slipping from his hand and clattering against the plate. Madison's jaw literally dropped, her phone dangling midair as if she'd forgotten how to hold it. Dad cleared his throat, a nervous tic he always had when things got uncomfortable. Valerie tried to laugh, the sound sharp and brittle. "Don't be ridiculous, Chloe. This house belongs to your father and me. You're just a tenant here, and you need to respect that." I didn't flinch. Then why don't you call Dad and ask him whose name is on the deed? She froze, but before she could spin another lie, I pulled my phone out and slid it across the table. Go ahead, put it on speaker. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed. The line rang, and then Dad's voice came through, weary but clear. Robert, she said, sugar dripping from her tone. Our dear Chloe is confused. She thinks this house belongs to her. That's nonsense, right? The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the sound of Dad clearing his throat again. Finally, he said, Actually, it's true. My parents put the house in Chloe's name before they passed. Boom. It was like a grenade went off in the room. Tyler's face drained of color, as if he'd just lost his gaming console in a power outage. Madison gasped audibly, eyes wide with disbelief. And Valerie, oh. Valerie, her carefully maintained composure shattered. Her face twisted, trying to form a smile that wouldn't come. What do you mean they put it in her name? She screeched. Why didn't you tell me this? Dad's voice was small, apologetic. I didn't think it was important at the time. Not important. The words stung, but they also fueled the fire in my chest. Valerie slammed the phone down, her cheeks blotchy red. This is absurd. You can't possibly believe this means anything. You're still a child. You wouldn't know the first thing about running a household. I leaned forward, my voice steady, calm, and colder than ice. You're right about one thing, Valerie. I might be young, but I know enough to recognize when someone's freeloading. You and your kids have lived off me for years, and I didn't even know it. That ends now. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Tyler stared at the table. Madison fiddled with her phone, probably wishing she could filter the moment out of existence. Dad said nothing, shame written all over his face. I stood up, the chair legs screeching against the floor. You wanted to talk about my living situation? Fine. Let's talk about yours. Because from where I'm standing, you're the ones who need to start worrying about rent. Ausbaden. And with that, the balance of power shifted forever. The room stayed frozen after I dropped the truth, like everyone was waiting for someone else to breathe first. Tyler poked at his cold spaghetti, Madison stared at her reflection in her phone screen, and Valerie's eyes darted around as if she could still spin this into her favor. I decided to twist the knife. You know what, Valerie? You're right about one thing: people who live here should contribute. So let's do that. Let's talk about rent. Her head snapped toward me, shock flashing across her face. Excuse me? I smiled, calm and deliberate. I ran the numbers. Market rent in this neighborhood is about $200 per person. So that means you, Tyler, and Madison owe me $3,600 a month. Oh, and utilities are separate, plus a security deposit. Tyler choked on his soda, coughing so hard he nearly fell off his chair. Madison shrieked, "You can't be serious!" And Valerie's face went pale, her perfectly applied foundation failing to hide the panic. "Oh, I'm dead serious," I replied, pulling out my phone. "And in case you're wondering, I also have recordings. Like the one where you called Dad this morning, trying to convince him to ship me off to some out-of-state college so you could keep living here rent-free." The silence turned thick, suffocating. Tyler's mouth dropped open, milk dribbling down his chin. Madison looked like she'd just lost her Instagram filter. Valerie's hands trembled as she tried to regain composure. "That's illegal," she snapped, voice rising. "You can't just record people like that." I smirked. Actually, Massachusetts is a one-party consent state. And guess what? I live here. My house, my rules. Dad had been quiet until then, but he finally sighed into the phone still lying on the table. "Valerie, Chloe's right. It's her house. We need to respect that." Hearing those words from him finally was like watching a dam crack. Valerie's jaw tightened, her fury bubbling just beneath the Botox. "This has clearly been a misunderstanding," she said, her tone suddenly sweet. "Of course you don't have to pay rent, Chloe. Let's just forget this conversation ever happened." But I leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "Oh no, Valerie. We're not forgetting anything. I've been your maid, your scapegoat, and your doormat for too long. Those days are over. From now on, if you want to live under my roof, you'll pay rent. Just like you wanted me to." The weight of my words hung in the air. Tyler shifted uncomfortably. Madison pouted, Dad rubbed his temples. But Valerie looked at me like I was no longer the quiet girl she could manipulate. She finally realized I wasn't bluffing. For the first time in years, I felt the balance tilt in my favor. And I wasn't about to give that power back. The next morning, the atmosphere in the house was radioactive. No one spoke to me directly, but I could feel the tension humming through the walls. Tyler sulked in his room, gaming louder than usual, his shouts echoing down the hallway. Madison pouted on the couch, snapping selfies with a tear-streaked face for her sad girl aesthetic. Valerie moved like a storm cloud, slamming cabinets a little too hard, her silk robes swishing angrily with each step. I knew they wouldn't back down, and I also knew words weren't enough. That's when I decided to bring in reinforcements. I reached out to a lawyer my grandparents had used, a woman named Karen Mitchell. She had already handled the transfer of the deed years ago, so she knew the paperwork inside out. When I explained what was happening, she laughed softly. "Honey, you don't need to justify anything. You own that house. And you can evict anyone who's not on the deed, including your father's wife." 2 days later, the official eviction notices were printed and sealed. My hands trembled as I carried them into the kitchen, but my voice didn't waver when I slid one across the table to Valerie, then handed the others to Tyler and Madison. "You have 30 days to vacate," I said simply. Valerie's face twisted in disbelief. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "Actually," I replied calmly, "I can, and I already filed everything with the court." Tyler jumped up, knocking over his gaming headset. "This is bull. I'm about to blow up on Twitch. You can't kick me out now." Madison clutched her phone like it was life support. "Daddy won't let you do this. He loves us more than some stupid house." I didn't even bother responding. Instead, I pulled up a video on my phone footage from the hidden security cameras I'd installed after talking to my lawyer. On the screen, Valerie was clearly visible, rummaging through my mother's jewelry box, slipping one of Grandma's necklaces into her purse. The color drained from her face. That's not what it looks like," she stammered. "It looks like theft," I said evenly. "And if you try to contest this eviction, I'll file criminal charges. Your choice." Her voice broke into high-pitched screeching. "How dare you record me? How dare you treat me like a criminal in my own home?" I leaned closer, my words sharp and final. "This isn't your home. It never was." For once, she had no comeback. Dad walked in halfway through the chaos, his tie loosened, his face pale. Valerie spun toward him, desperate. "Robert, tell her she can't do this. Tell her this is our house." But he just rubbed his forehead, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "Valerie, she's right. The deed is in Chloe's name. We should start looking for somewhere else." Her jaw dropped. Tyler froze mid-rant. Madison's phone slipped from her hand. It was the first time my dad had ever openly chosen me over Valerie, and it felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Still, I knew this battle wasn't finished. Valerie wasn't the type to leave quietly. But now I had the law on my side, proof in my pocket, and 30 days on the clock. And I was ready to watch her empire of entitlement crumble. 30 days passed faster than I imagined. Each morning, I woke up to Valerie's icy glares, Tyler's passive-aggressive muttering, and Madison's dramatic sighs. But I counted down the days like a prisoner scratching lines into a wall, except this time, I was the warden. Eviction day arrived on a gray Tuesday. The moving truck pulled up at 9 sharp, flanked by 2 bulky movers and a sheriff's deputy who stood calmly at the curb, clipboard in hand. Valerie came downstairs in a faux Chanel suit, acting as though she were orchestrating her grand exit. "This is beneath me," she announced to no one in particular. "We're leaving on our own terms." But her voice wavered as the movers carried out box after box of her knockoff designer bags, Tyler's broken gaming chair, and Madison's endless supply of Starbucks tumblers. Tyler yelled that his career was ruined because he had to disconnect his streaming setup. Madison sobbed into her phone, filming every second for her followers, insisting she was the victim of a cruel stepsister. Valerie tried one last stunt, clutching my grandmother's china set and declaring it was hers. But the deputy simply pointed at my security footage and said, "Ma'am, best not to make this worse." By noon, they were gone. The house, once suffocating under their chaos, was silent. For the first time in years, I could hear the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the fridge, the whisper of peace. Dad didn't move out with them, not right away. He drifted between Valerie's sister's apartment and cheap motels, looking thinner, older, and quieter each time I saw him. He called sometimes, his voice heavy with regret. I didn't hate him, but I couldn't save him either. He had chosen Valerie for 12 years. Now he had to face what that cost. As for me, I reclaimed every corner of the house. Tyler's room became my office. Madison's pink chaos turned into a walk-in closet. Valerie's so-called meditation room became my yoga studio, where actual peace finally existed. And I wasn't alone. Mom's best friend, Elise Parker, moved into one of the spare rooms. She taught me the recipes my mom used to make, helped me replace the keepsakes Valerie had thrown away, and reminded me of the warmth this house was built on. Sometimes I sit in the kitchen at night, sipping tea, staring at the deed framed on the wall. My grandparents' names are on it, then mine. Proof that they believed in me long before I believed in myself. Was I harsh? Maybe. Do I regret it? Not for a second. Valerie demanded rent. Instead, I collected justice. And this house, my house, is finally home again.